Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the October edition of our second Wednesday safety session powered by Milwaukee Tools. My name is Carlos Carrillo. I'm the Executive Director of the Associated General Contractors of America South Florida chapter. And I'm very happy to bring you this event brought to you by our fabulous safety committee. So I want to say a couple thank yous first. I know it gets boring, but we got to show our gratitude to these people. I want to thank the team at Kelly Cronenberg for their help. Thank you, Tim, and New Addition Cedric, who's going to be helping us out on the tech side. So thank you both for helping us out. Our physical hosts today, as they have been for the past few months during the pandemic, is Safe Ride Solutions. They very generously have given us their facility in order for us to be able to broadcast from in a very safe and socially distanced manner, and we're happy to do that for you today as well. And last, but certainly not least, I want to thank our sponsors, Milwaukee Tools. So it just so happens that we have Uriel Soto joining us from the road today because these guys don't stop, which is fantastic. And I know you got your mask on even in the truck, Uriel. So I'm going to turn things over to Uriel. Let me get his PowerPoint presentation up on the screen and flip things back over to you. Uriel, go ahead.
All right, perfect. Well, morning, everybody. Hope everybody's staying safe out there. You know, as things continue to get back to some type of normalcy, we have to continue to be diligent as safety professionals, not only in our industry, but obviously for our organization. So we're continuing to work with our...
So anybody that complains about the expense of new triathlons.
Hey guys, please.
Can you guys hear me? Okay. So like I was saying, definitely one of the things that we're continuing to do is supporting our partners in the site on the field in their office with safety trainings, power tool consultations, and sponsorships for different job site activities. One of the things, if you go to the second slide there, Carlos, one of the things I wanted to talk a little bit about today is tool lanyard and tethering solutions. One of the big fatal four is obviously one of the struck by. So, you know, there is nets that you could put on your job sites to prevent some of the items from falling, but you could also go a step above and have a tool tethering or tool lanyard program for all your subcontractors on site to help them also eliminate those injuries. You know, every 11 minutes you have an injury by a dropped item, and out of all those injuries, 5% of those are actually related to dropped objects. So we have a complete tool lanyard and tethering program. The great thing about that is that we're seeing a lot of sites also start going to a lanyard or tied off option to reduce trip hazards and overall just create a safer work environment. So we do have the option of coming to your sites and supplying these items for you to see how they work out, and then also help us gain a little bit more knowledge on that issue and how we can continue to avoid these struck by incidents and make a safer job site for everybody. So if this is something that you're interested in, if you go to the next slide, you got some of our team's contact information. So we are the South Florida team, so definitely looking forward to meeting all of the members as we continue to get back to the job site and continue to get back to full throttle, right? All right, guys, well, hope you all finish your Q4 strong, and thank you for the time. Carlos, AGC, can't thank you guys enough for the local and the national support that you guys give in Milwaukee.
Thank you, Uriel. We appreciate everything that you do for us. Our sponsors are what makes us able to get the technology. Look at this cool microphone that we use in order to bring you these presentations. So thank you all very much. So October is National Protect Your Hearing Month. That being the case, the members of our safety committee decided the perfect presentation for this month would be hearing conservation. So I would like to remind you all that we want you to participate. So as we go through this fantastic presentation, you guys can ask questions and make comments by using Zoom's chat feature. So make sure you check out the chat feature, you type in your questions, you have options that you can send it over to me personally or to the group. And we'd love to have you do that. I'll get those questions in front of Sherry, who'll be our presenter today. And you will also have an opportunity to participate in the polls that Sherry will be putting in. So one more thing, also make sure that you stay on after the presentation for information on some items you will be receiving from 3M after today's presentation. So we'll go over what those items are, talk to you a little bit more about that. So let's get into the meat of things. Today's presentation is being given by 3M's Sherry Franklin Smith, excuse me. Sherry has a CIH and CSP designation, along with 20 plus years of experience helping to keep workers healthy and safe. She has almost a decade of experience managing an organization of safety and health professionals, supporting 3M's PPE products, such as hearing and respiratory protection, protective clothing, and fall protection. She has sponsored human factors research in visibility, protective clothing, and hearing conservation, and has helped several companies implement hearing protection fit testing. I couldn't think of anybody better to do this presentation. Haven't been able to see her practice it. I'm really excited to have her present it to you guys today. So all the way from Minnesota, correct, Sherry?
That's right.
All right, cool. Well, let's get it going. Sherry, please, the floor is yours.
All right. Good morning, everyone. I am incredibly excited to be here with you this morning. All right, sorry about that. So we're about to get started here. And hopefully you're seeing my screen now. And today we're gonna go beyond the basics. And we're gonna talk about some advanced topics in hearing conservation and make that specific to construction. Before I get started, just a few points. This presentation is based on current United States federal and other requirements. Certainly, if the state of Florida has a different requirement for you or your county or your company, certainly follow that. Always read the user instructions and follow the law. This presentation contains an overview of general information and should not be relied upon to make specific decisions. Completing this program does not certify proficiency in safety and health. I wish I could give you a CSP for just listening to me today. I'm good, but not that good. Information is current as of the date of the presentation, and requirements can change in the future. This presentation should not be relied upon in isolation, as the content is often accompanied with additional or clarifying information or discussion. 3M owns all rights to this presentation, so as much as you might be tempted to snap a picture of me and put me on Facebook right now, please note we will provide you information after the presentation, and so please don't do that. Okay. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about an overview of some of the noise exposure hazards in construction. We're going to talk about 2 different case studies on best practices in hearing conservation. We're going to describe something new that we often don't think about when we're picking our hearing protection, and this is the concept of audibility. How well you can hear, detect, and localize that sound. And then we're going to talk about a few new resources that are available to you as you put together your own hearing conservation program. Okay, so let's keep this interactive and fun. We got our first question for you. I know it's early and you're still drinking your coffee. So what hearing conservation best practices have you implemented so far? Have you implemented noise controls, fit testing, audibility risk assessments, or educational campaigns? So hopefully our first poll is showing for you. Okay, so go ahead and click your answer. Give you a few more seconds there. Okay, at this point, we're going to close the poll. So can you tell me what the results are? Let's see. Okay, so according to the results, most of you have implemented noise controls. That's excellent. Some of you have done audibility risk assessments, and some have done educational campaigns, but nobody has done fit testing yet. Okay, so this should be a fun presentation. All right, so let's move on to the next phase. Why are we talking about hearing conservation today? How many of you have experienced this? You're trying to talk on your cell phone and you can barely hear what the person is trying to tell you. So let's get our sites quieter so that is not the most common word on the construction site. If you had to guess which trade had the most hearing loss, would you have guessed the welder? So this study done by CPWR shows that across construction as a whole, that 58% of people working in construction have experienced hearing impairment. And the worst of those is the welder, the iron worker, the boilermaker, and the carpenter. So it's important. I mean, the 58% is high overall compared to other industries, but if you're in the top 4, you really need to pay attention to protecting your hearing. So why should we care about our hearing? Noise and tinnitus continue to be top occupational illnesses. And in the US, if you had to guess what the most chronic physical conditions are, you probably would guess, okay, I'll let you think about that for a minute, okay? If you guessed heart disease, you probably would have guessed that one. You might have thought about arthritis, but hearing loss probably didn't come up in your mind. You know, and for the US, you know, a lot of us are overweight, we have heart disease and cholesterol, but hearing loss is one of the most common chronic physical conditions in the US. There's other reasons why we should care about our hearing. It's not just losing your hearing, but you can also have microvascular damage. So imagine that. You can also have increased opportunity for occupational injuries because perhaps you can't hear backup alarms or instructions or things that you need to hear so that you can function properly. It may be harder for you to work and complete mental tasks just because you won't be able to hear. It also affects your ability to communicate with others. I think sometimes about my grandfather sitting at the end of the table, and sometimes he was staring off into space, not because he wanted to, but because he couldn't hear the conversation at the table so that he can engage. So it's important to protect our hearing so that as we age, we're able to enjoy our families. Here's another reason why we in construction really need to care. When you think about the average construction worker starting work, you know, just after high school, and working till just the age of 25, may have the same level of hearing loss as a 50-year-old that has worked in an industry that's not noise exposed. So you don't want to be 50 when you're 25, especially if you're 25. So it's really important for us to get to our younger workers early so that they can start protecting their hearing. And oftentimes these young people are coming to us with some noise-induced hearing loss already from their earbuds and playing music too loud. So what other things that we need to think about in the construction industry? One study of 1,300 samples showed that at least 10% were greater than the OSHA Pell on a regular basis, but 70% of the time it was above the NIOSH recommended level of 85 dBA. So typical sounds on a construction site, you know, 88 dBA for a circular saw, 96 for a chipping gun, and 102 for a jackhammer. So that's putting you in double hearing protection. So we have lots of opportunities to overexpose ourselves to noise on the construction site. So another great factoid from courtesy of CPWR is that 73% of the time, construction workers are exposed above the NIOSH recommended limit. So why should we care about the NIOSH limit when OSHA allows us to go up to 90? Well, here's why we should care. At the level of 90, where we are at the US, we are behind the rest of the world in our hearing conservation efforts. So at 90, even if we meet it all the time, 17 to 25% of people will still experience hearing loss if we're only protecting people to the 90 dB. If we just lower that to 85 dBA, which is what NIOSH recommends and where the rest of the world pretty much is at that, you lower the risk of people still getting hearing loss if properly protected to 6 to 8%. Now, if you get down to 80, which is probably nearly impossible on a construction site, you get that down to 1%. but we really should make the effort to get from 17 to 25% down to 6 to 8%. So if you look at the rest of the world, you could see that most other countries that are as advanced as the United States are at what we call 85.3. So that means the permissible exposure limit being 85 with an exchange rate of 3 dBA. And that means for every 3 dB, you can be exposed for half the time. So if you kind of consider what these different standards give us, in the US, since we're at 90 and 5, let's just say you're exposed, you're jackhammering. So in the US, you can be exposed to jackhammering for 2 hours. In Australia, 15 minutes, and in Mexico, an hour. So that shows you how changing that exchange rate makes a difference. So NIOSH is recommending 15 minutes, whereas OSHA is currently allowing us to be exposed to that level of noise for 2 hours. Another study of audiometric testing found that 20% of construction workers self-reported some type of hearing problem. So it's important to do audiometric testing as part of a hearing conservation program. It is required in general industry. Unfortunately, in construction, we have a lot of challenges. We typically have a transient workforce. You may have multiple employers on one site, and a lot of remote work sites, where we're trying to get things done. So I'm going to talk to you about a case study. This was a company in Australia, and it was a mining company, but we can still learn a lot from them, what they learned. And this was over 4,000 people in there. So they did a lot of things here. First, they did educational campaigns. They created programs and videos, and they got the workers all excited about protecting their hearing. So that's something that a lot of you are doing already, starting to put these educational programs and videos together. The next thing that they did was they implemented fit testing. And so they started helping workers to understand if they're properly inserting their hearing protection. They also provided a variety of hearing protection devices to folks. And then they also gave each worker a sticker to put in their hard hat to remind them of which earplug was the best one for them. They also did regular audits, and they did interventions for people that had threshold shifts already to make sure that they were maintaining the gains. And they also marked off their hearing conservation areas. The other thing that they did is they did some noise control engineering efforts. They had a buy quiet program, and they issued these personal noise indicator badges, which are these little badges that you wear, and they flash green when you're below 85 and they flash red when you're above, just to kind of give the workers a visual reminder of when they were in high noise areas. So what did they find? By putting all these efforts into place, they were actually able to statistically reduce their threshold shifts significantly from 5% a year down to 1% a year in just 6 years of doing this program. And what they learned over this is that the most important thing that really helped them to lower their numbers was the education and the implementation of fit testing of the hearing protection. They did do some modest noise engineering controls, but that was small compared to the other results. Okay, so I'm just going to make sure you were listening to me. Okay, in this case study, which best practices were presumed to be the most effective in statistically reducing their threshold shifts? Was it A, education and training, B, fit testing, C, engineering controls, D, A and B, or E, all of the above? All right, so we'll have our second poll. So go ahead and vote. Here's your chance to get your vote in and participate today. All right, I'll give you 10 more seconds. We'll see which of you guys are quick on the draw for voting. All right, we're going to close the poll. So if Carlos can give us the result. Okay, so some people said all of the above, some people said education and training, and some people said A and B. All right, so the answer was A and B. It was both education and training and fit testing that they found was the most statistical in reducing their results. Okay, let's move on. So one of the things that they did that we can implement and we can take away from this was this concept of buying quiet. So NIOSH has put together a power tools database where you can find quieter tools that you can implement on your site. So you can visit this handy dandy database. We will give you these links afterwards. And they have a whole website on how to buy quiet and how to find quieter tools that can be used. So while one of the most common ways to protect your hearing on a construction site is to wear hearing protection devices, engineering controls are always preferred and required by OSHA and others when feasible. The thing about hearing protection devices is that even though everybody has these, sometimes people don't wear them the whole time. And then even though some people might be wearing them, sometimes they're not wearing them correctly. So why might that be important? Okay, so here's a little thought experiment for you. I want you to take a look at these earmuffs here at the top of this slide here. Imagine that you have an earmuff that has 30 dB as its NRR in terms of protection. What if during the day you take your earmuffs off for 15 minutes to have a conversation at least 4 times during the 8 hours that you're at work? Does that seem reasonable that you might do that? Well, if you do that, if you are unprotected for just 1 hour out of the 8 hours at the 90 dB of noise that OSHA allows, you have effectively cut the effective protection of that hearing protector in half. So instead of getting 30, you're only getting 14. And if by chance you actually are secretly not wearing your hearing protection for half of the day, it's cut down by 1/6, down to 5. So if people are not wearing the earplugs or the earmuffs for the whole shift, they're not getting the protection that's claimed on the box. So it's really important that hearing protection is worn the whole time. There's other reasons why people don't wear their hearing protection the way that they probably should. Sometimes it's like, the painless nature of noise-induced hearing loss. If you get a nail in your eye, you will be sure to wear your safety glasses the next time. But unfortunately, you don't know you're losing your hearing until either A, your audiogram tells you, or your grandchildren ask you why you have the television up way too loud. Another reason why people take their hearing protection off is because they want to have a conversation. They feel that they can't hear, or they can't hear well enough, so they feel like they need to take it off, or they wear it halfway in so that they can hear a conversation. Another reason is the plug that they're wearing is probably just uncomfortable for them, so they just take it off. One of the things that we do in the US is we just overprotect people, like how much of a good thing is enough, So why not just find the highest NRR earmuffs and earplugs that I can find and put everybody in that. Sometimes we don't provide enough variety in styles of hearing protection devices to allow everyone to get the best insertion. And lastly, training. How many times, even though you do your annual training every year, do you still see this, the earplug halfway out the ear or just barely in it? Or better yet, my favorite one, the earplug cut in half and just tapped on the side of the ear there. So when you're thinking about selecting hearing protection devices, there's 4 things that you need to think about. The first 2 are comfort and use. If it's not comfortable, people just flat out aren't going to wear it, or they're not going to wear it right. The second thing I want you to think about is the ease of use. A lot of times, the most common plug is these roll down squishy plugs. Well, let me ask you this question. On a construction site, how many people have perfectly clean hands? How many people are not wearing gloves? So given that your hands are probably dirty and you're wearing gloves, you really don't want to have to roll down an earplug with dirty hands and gloves on. So why not consider a push-in style? This can allow you to put the earplugs on and off easily while wearing gloves. And if your hands are dirty, you don't feel like you're putting the dirt and the grease from your hand into your ear. So think about choosing an earplug that might be better suited to the construction site. Next, we're going to talk about attenuation. So On a box of every earplugs, the EPA requires manufacturers to put this cool thing called the NRR, otherwise known as the noise reduction rating. This is sort of like your miles per gallon for the earplug. It allows you to compare different earplugs. But here's the thing. This is Cameron here, our researcher. And when they calculate the NRR, it's sort of like getting your audiogram done. You're sitting in the sound booth. It's kind of quiet. And you have somebody that comes, somebody like Cameron, who really knows how to insert that earplug. And he's going to insert that earplug so deep in your ear, you're going to say, wow, I didn't know earplugs could be inserted that deep in an ear. However, that is not what your site looks like. This is what your site looks like. You don't have, a professional earplug inserter inserting the earplugs for your employees. They're going to do it on their own. And so they may not take as much care as the researcher. And so they may not get the same value as what's on the box. So why not determine what each worker is actually capable of getting based on the way that they are personally inserting the earplugs? So hence, I'm going to give you a new concept. Instead of NRR, I want you to get the PAR, the personal attenuation rating. Each worker, depending on the shape of their ear canal and the shape of the earplug, may get different results. Certain people have smaller ear canals, certain ethnic groups have smaller ear canals, certain folks have very, very large ear canals. So let's look at this canning facility. So this was a study that we did at 3M of 300 subjects. And this particular facility had really high noise, so they were able to get 70% of people to properly insert their earplugs and pass the fit test. I have seen this as low as 50% or even less in certain industries. Of those that didn't pass the fit test, 17% were able to just be retrained. So like learning how to properly insert the earplug and put it a little deeper. But here's the kicker. 11% of the folks, it didn't matter how hard they tried with that particular plug. They have what I call the earplug ear canal mismatch. So there's certain folks that no matter how hard you train them, if the earplug is not the right size, they're not going to get a good fit. So that means they need a different one. And there's some people whose ear canal shapes are just so different that the only thing they can wear is an earmuff. So you just need to identify who those people are so that you can get them into a plug or a hearing protection device that works for them. So what are some of the benefits of fit testing? It can help you identify those 11% of people that are going to struggle. It can help you train people to properly insert your earplugs. How many of you have watched that boring fitting video in trying to get how to properly insert your earplugs? So this can be used as a training tool. When the person properly inserts the earplug, it flashes green to let them know that they've done it right. And it allows them kind of hands-on practice in doing it right. So it gives you some documentation that you actually did help them ensure the proper insertion of the earplugs. So what does OSHA say about fit testing? Of course, PAR is not a replacement for NRR, but personal fit testing can be used towards satisfying these requirements, ensuring proper initial fitting, as well as towards satisfying the training requirement. So can you use it to provide training to employees in the use and care of hearing protection devices? OSHA says yes. So if you're going to go through the effort to put fit testing in place, here's what we learned after following the canning facility. If you do these 4 things, it will help you to maintain the gains. What you'll want to do is after 6 months, go back, and anybody that either had trouble inserting the earplugs, needed a different plug, or already has a threshold shift that already have an issue, go back and test those people again. Make sure, A, that they're still using their assigned plug. And if they're not using the assigned plug, why not? Is it because they don't have access? So don't make them go to the trailer and get the special plug. If you have, what we found is most companies are able to work with 4 plugs or 3 plugs in an earmuff and cover most of their workers. So put all 3 plugs out so that people can find them when they get on the job site. Don't make them have to go somewhere special. If they do, they probably won't do it. The other thing is you want to make sure the plug is comfortable. If while you're doing fit testing, what was comfortable for 5 to 7 minutes may not be comfortable after 12 hours on the job, so you might want to choose a different one. And especially for anyone that has already a threshold shift, you want to make sure that they are getting the protection that they need. So follow-up is key. The other thing to think about is that 9 out of 10 workers are exposed to 95 dBA or less. And so why is that important? It was very interesting to learn that people that are working right around 85 dBA had greater hearing loss than people working in much higher noise. So why might that be? Perhaps when you're working in really high noise, your ears hurt at the end of the day, so you're more likely to wear your hearing protection. But if you especially overprotect people that are at this 85 dBA, they may be more likely to remove their hearing move their hearing protection devices to have conversations. So it's really important, because a lot of construction sites are right here at this place, that we emphasize the importance of that. So my message to you is protect, but don't overprotect. So you probably want to target your reduction down to 70 to 80 dBA. This is kind of what in Canada, they don't allow you to overprotect people like we do here in the US. And so we can look to Canada for some guidance here and try to keep it in that range. So that means you may not need a 30 in our earplug, depending on what people are doing. You can get away with a push-in around 20, which might allow people to have more conversation, and perhaps they would be more likely to keep their hearing protection on. If you have people that already have a hearing loss, you might want to consider a flat attenuation musician's plug, which will allow them to hear a few more speech syllables a little bit better. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to talk about is something new, and this is the concept of audibility. Why do we need to care about audibility? AIHA recently put out this Focus 4 for Health guide, similar to OSHA's the 4 top ways to die on the construction site. But now they wanted to look at the health top 4. And so with that, in it is hearing conservation. And with that, they put out some other recommendations, which included considering active hearing protection with electronics, which we're going to talk about, flat attenuation plugs, which I just mentioned, which don't cut out speech communications as much, and earmuffs with built-in communication systems are available. And we're going to talk about some of the advantages of some of these new technologies. So in a construction site, you're actually kind of similar to the military in that you have intermittent and fluctuating noise. Somebody's hammering, somebody's not hammering, somebody's jackhammering, somebody's not jackhammering. Sometimes it's completely quiet on the site. Sometimes it's really, really noisy. You may have lots of equipment going on around you, and you may need to hear warning signals, etc. And your situational awareness demands are quite high. In other words, you're working really hard on what you're doing, but you also, on an active site, have to be very aware of what's going on around you. Sometimes you may need to have face-to-face communications with somebody that you're working with. And now in today's COVID environment, you may need to have face-to-face conversations with somebody, but also 6 feet apart in a noisy area. So now you can't get up in that person's face and talk to them. You need to be able to talk from 6 feet apart and understand what you're saying. Also, you may have people that already have radios that are also wearing hearing protection devices that are struggling to hear what the radio communication is. So let's talk about audibility. What does audibility mean? Audibility is around auditory situational awareness, which is how our brain processes sounds to help us understand what's going on. So I want you to imagine with me for a minute that you're on a large open site and there's an earth mover about 200 feet to the left of you. And the first thing is you're going to detect the sound. You hear the earth mover moving. And based on your knowledge of that sound, you identify that. You're like, yep, that's an earth mover that's over there. You can tell by how loud it is that you're going to guess that it's about 200 feet away. So you can estimate how far it is. And you know what? now it's starting to get louder. And so you're detecting that it's probably coming closer to you. And now you happen to be a spotter. And so you're going to try to communicate with the driver, hey, you're getting a little too close. So situational awareness is our ability to detect sound. And if we can't detect the sound, we can't do any of the rest. So it's important to not only thinking about protecting your hearing, but how well you can hear conversations, how well you can detect what's going on around you. So when you're thinking about hearing protection, we often think about how loud it is, and we think about how much protection that particular earplug can give us. That's what's required to do. But what else should we be considering that's best practice? We need to consider comfort, like I mentioned before. We need to consider how easy it is to insert the earplugs. We need to consider our situational awareness. You know, can we hear conversations that we need to hear that are critical instructions? I'm trying to lock something out and I'm talking over my phone, and if I miss a step or I turn something wrong, I might blow up something, you know? Fit. Is the earplug that I'm wearing properly inserted? What other environments am I dealing with? Is it hot and humid today? Is it cold? Granted, in Florida, you don't have to deal with minus 30 degrees like we have here in Minnesota. PPE compatibility. You know, am I wearing a hard hat? Am I wearing a welding face shield? What else have I got on that I need to contend with? So let's focus on audibility and what we can do about that. So for you personally, when you think about selecting hearing protection today, either for yourself or for your teams, what things do you currently consider? A, comfort and use. B, compatibility with other PPE. C, noise reduction rating. D, cost. Or E, audibility and need to communicate. What are you already thinking about? All right, we'll give you a moment to vote. All right, we'll let you click. We will give you a few more seconds to get those votes in. 10 more seconds. All right, so we're going to close the poll and we're going to see those results. All right, so at least half of you are thinking about comfort and ease of use right now. Some people are thinking about noise reduction rating, and a few of you are thinking about audibility and the need to communicate. Excellent. All right, so I'm going to close this poll and we will move on to the next slide. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the hearing in your hearing conservation program, and we're going to get into some of these advanced technologies that we can put into place. So I'm going to talk about two things today: protective hearing and protective communication. So first we're going to talk about protective hearing. And so protective hearing are things that can help you hear communication when there's intermittent and unpredictable and moderate noise level. So these kind of devices allow you to hear what's going around you when there's significant quiet. But when your quiet is interrupted by impulse noise, you know, such as a nail gun going off or hammering, the device kicks in and helps to reduce the amount of sound that comes through. These types of devices are helpful when workers have to move between loud and quiet areas, and when workers need heightened awareness in their surroundings due to moving vehicles, equipment, or alarm. Okay, so we're going to talk about protective hearing. So in the environmental listening, we have these microphones. So let's say you're wearing the earmuffs and there's these environmental listening microphones. And what they do is they help to pick up the nearby sounds. And so you, as the worker, are able to potentially, in some of these devices, adjust the amount of sound that you want and can amplify the levels of sound. For some people that already have a hearing loss, sometimes they find these helpful. Now, they're not hearing aids, but the amplification is beneficial to some people. If you turn the environmental microphones off, it's the same as wearing your earplugs that same level of protection. Now, these particular things don't necessarily have the speech communication microphone, which we'll talk about in a minute. But these environmental listening devices allow you to have a better sense of what's going on around you. In some of these devices, we have both over-the-ear and in-ear solutions. And the in-ear solutions have like 3 different levels that you can choose. All right, so how do these level-dependent microphones work? So the way that they work is when things are quiet, they actually amplify the sound so that you can hear it. Because if you were wearing a straight, regular earplug, you wouldn't be hearing those sounds, or not at the same level. And in loud environments, they clip the sound down to 82 dB. So if I am just listening and I'm hearing my background and all's good, and all of a sudden somebody comes up and, you know, now something happened, instead of hearing that sound at the sound of my clap, which is well above 80 dB, what I would hear instead is I would still hear that the clap happened, but I would hear it at 82 dB. So the hearing device is what we call level dependent. So depending on the level of the sound, it either amplifies it or reduces it. So we created some simulations for you to kind of understand how this might work. Now, these are simulated audio files, so on a real radio, it might sound slightly different, but this kind of helps you to understand this concept. So let's say if you didn't have any earplugs on at all, here's what you would hear.
Do you copy, Joe? Gonna need you to head into the area B when you're done.
Okay. So now let's say I put on my regular hearing protection, my passive plugs. What would I hear?
Do you copy, Joe? Gonna need you to head into the area B when you're done.
All right, so we can see that if we're wearing the 30 NRR plug, you know, that we can still hear, but the overall sound is a little bit muted. Now,
do you copy, Joe? Gonna need you to head into the area B when you're done.
With the environmental listening, I'm able to kind of better hear the conversation while protecting my hearing at the same time. Okay, so next we're going to talk about protective communication. So environmental and protective hearing allows us to be more aware of our surroundings, but the protective communications allow us to also better understand communications that we may need to have. So protective communication devices generally need an interface to work. This could be a radio, it could be a cell phone or an intercom system. Most common on a construction site would be a radio or a cell phone. And the way that you would connect these devices, they can either be wired solutions, there's also wireless Bluetooth type solutions, or integrated solutions where you have the whole radio and everything right on your head in the headset. But all of these types of options are available to you to use. And what these protective communication devices do for you is that they enable clear communication and noise. So if you have a situation where you really need to talk face-to-face in very noisy situations, these particular devices can be helpful. They may also be helpful in our current COVID-19 environment where we now can't get as close to each other as we might need to have a conversation. The advantage of these devices is they have a noise canceling microphone, so it allows you to talk even in a noisy area and have clear communication with the person that's receiving it in the other headset. And the sound is reproduced inside the hearing protector so that the level is low enough to not damage your hearing, but amplified enough so that you can have a clear conversation. Okay. So when we think about having clear conversation, we have this concept of signal to noise. And so signal to noise, the signal is what you actually want to hear, the conversation, the backup alarm, and the noise is the background. So if we want to have good speech intelligibility, we need to get the signal above the noise. So I'm going to play this little audio file for you. So this is a signal in noise where the signal and noise are equal.
1, 2, 3.
All right, so now if I'm wearing hearing protection over top of that same signal, here's what I'm hearing.
1, 2, 3.
So the key to increasing our communication is to get that signal above the noise. So let's hear this example.
1, 2, 3.
So if we increase it by just 6 dB over the noise, we're being able to hear it. And
1, 2, 3.
if we increase it by 12, we're really clearly being able to hear it. So what about when the signal is less than the noise? How does that sound? So that's the key. So when we wear these protective devices, it helps us to get the signal of what we want to hear, whether it's the backup alarm or the person talking, to be above the noise. So with protective communication, oftentimes two-way radios are one of the most common solutions that are used there. These are widely used in both industry and the military. They're quick and reliable, and they're able to broadcast messages to the whole work group. So you can put these, everybody on the same channel if you want to do that as well, or just have two people that need to work together to talk to each other. The limitations of these two-way radios is that only one person can talk at a time. The communication range is limited to about 1 mile. Sometimes they can be susceptible to other radios, interference, and many don't limit the radio signal. And so if you're on a public signal, perhaps somebody else might be able to listen. But these are great ways to communicate. So what's wrong with these pictures? In the first two pictures, you see two people talking over a radio, and they both have hearing protection on, and they're about to lock off something, but yet they can't communicate very well. In the last picture here, we also have a person that has a lapel mic for their radio, but we forgot about the last 12 inches, getting the sound from the lapel mic into the ear. So why not consider a solution that allows that person to communicate and protect their hearing at the same time? So how do these noise canceling microphones work? The way these microphones work is there's two ports on either side of the mic. And so you have the noise that's going on around it. And so the microphone is picking up the noise on both sides, and then it's picking up the speech signal on one side. And so it's able to cancel out the noise on both sides, allowing you to hear the speech only. So here's a simulation of the protected speech. So let's listen without any hearing protection, and what will we hear? Here the signal is way less than noise there. So let's hear that with our classic hearing protection, or passive. Okay, and now let's hear this with protected communication.
Do you copy, Joe? Gonna need you to head over to Area B when you're done.
Okay, so we can see the advantage of having the protective communications. Now here's one that's near and dear to my heart. As you have heard, I've worked for over 20 years keeping people safe, and one of the places that I spent 20 years of my career in was helping to reduce struck by accidents, largely by getting people into high visibility clothing that helps to make them to be able to be seen. But now I have another technology to add to that tool case when thinking about reducing struck by accidents. Sadly, this year I have learned in the past 12 months of an accident, of a spotter that was run over. So what if the spotter and the driver could actually talk to each other? So let's hear this simulation.
You got another couple of feet, Larry. Looking good.
Okay, so with passive hearing protection.
You got another couple of feet, Larry. Looking good.
And what if they could talk to each other?
You got another couple of feet, Larry. Looking good.
So it's something for us to think about, not only as protecting our hearing, but also thinking about ways that we can help reduce accidents. Okay, so now we're going to we've talked about protective hearing and protective communications. And I'm going to talk about one last thing here, and this is about doing a hearing conservation assessment. So now we've talked about the different types of hearing protection devices, but the next thing that you want to think about is when and where you might want to use these different types of devices. I'd love for you to put these advanced devices on everyone, but that may not be economically feasible. So you need to think about when are the best places to put it. So what's a typical hazardous noise exposure? Is a passive plug perfectly acceptable in that situation? Do they need to hear backup alarms? Are they okay with the reduced hearing due to the hearing protection use? What is the impact of the hearing protection on somebody that's already had a hearing loss? And how is the productivity impacted if people have to stop what they're doing to have a conversation? So there's 3 things to think about. Of course, this isn't an exhaustive list, but think about these 3 things. First, identify the higher risk tasks. Those are the areas where you really want to think about putting these types of advanced devices. Places where it's critical to hear warning signals or machinery. Places where collision with moving vehicles is possible. Where communication is critical. Maybe in COVID times where you need to have 2 people talking to work on a project together, but they can't get close to each other. Evaluate what kind of noise signals that you have, and can you get that signal above the noise, considering how much protection you need, how much hearing loss people already have, and what other electronic communications you're already using. Are you already using radios or not? And lastly, incorporating that into your program, the ability, hearing requirements, fit testing, and engineering controls. Okay, so a couple things to look at as you're on your site. Observe people's communication. Ask what could happen if they couldn't hear each other. Could their communication be enhanced by having some advanced hearing protection devices? Look for physical hazards, fork trucks, moving equipment. Sadly, the deaths on a construction site for moving equipment, you would think that the motoring public would be the killer, but unfortunately it's friendly fire. It's within the work zone that there are a lot more deaths. So thinking about these areas where we would want to put some advanced devices. Okay, so what's the most appropriate hearing protector? It could be a passive one. It could be an advanced, flat attenuation plug. It could be something with environmental microphones, and it could be a full radio solution. It's the one that best meets the worker's needs when all the factors are considered, and ultimately the one that they will wear, because if they don't wear it, they're not getting the protection that they need. So at this point, I'll open it up for questions. And if there aren't any questions, I'll quickly share with you a couple of resources that you can use for your hearing conservation program.
Hey, Sherry, thank you very much. That was a fantastic presentation. You got a question there from Georgette Cigaravan. Can you see her question?
No, I can't see the questions. Can you read it out for me?
Absolutely, I'll be happy to. If you have exposed an average between 80 dB to 102 dB on less than 3 hours, which one is the correct hearing protection to be used?
Okay, so you're saying that the person is, a single person is exposed to all 3 of those for 2 hours, or the person,
she's asking if you're exposed to 80 to 102 decibels for less than 3 hours. Which hearing protection do you suggest to use?
Okay, so if the person is, what you kind of have to do is kind of look at a noise dose within that. The person that's over 100, if that's going to be over 15 minutes, that particular person, when they're doing that task, may need to be potentially in double hearing protection, depending on the amount of time within the 2 hours, you're going to be exposed. If it's for the whole 2 hours, you're going to probably exceed your dose there pretty quickly. For the person that's in 80, if that's, the whole 2 hours, the person that's only in 80, technically doesn't have to wear hearing protection at all. So you may want to put them in a lower attenuating plug, something that's like maybe around 20 if you're going to have like compliance like across your site. So a push-in plug could potentially be appropriate there.
Awesome. And we got some great questions. I told you we got a good crowd here.
Excellent.
Who is qualified to fit test, and how do you do it?
Okay, so in terms of fit testing, it's very easy to get trained on that. So if someone needs training on that, at 3M, they could call Tito and he would come out and train you on how to do it. If you're not comfortable doing it, you can, there's trucks, like the people that do your audiograms, you could ask them to also do the fit testing. So at the same time the worker's getting the audiogram, they can also get the fit testing done at the same time. You could contact your 3M rep. They might come out and help you or train a couple folks on your site to do it. It's really not that hard to learn. But if you're not comfortable, there's certainly third-party groups that you can hire to come on site to help do it for you. Great question.
Awesome. All right, they keep coming. All right, how often are you seeing OSHA issuing citations in construction for hearing protection matters or the lack thereof? And you know, Sherry, I know that you're in Minnesota, but if anybody here on the chat wants to talk about experiences that they've had on their sites, please let me know. You can add that in the chat, and I think that'd be a great answer to that question. And again, how often are you seeing OSHA issuing citations in construction for hearing protection matters or the lack thereof? Sherry, did I lose you there?
No, I'm here. I didn't know if you were letting people share their thoughts in the
sure.
chat, or you want me to
So
answer the question.
you can go right ahead, and if people
So that's a good question. I would have to research to get you an actual percentage, but certainly you wouldn't want them to show up to your site and have them to see people without wearing their hearing protection. That would be likely something that would get on their list. So I could get back to you with the actual statistics. I have the ability to pull that data, but that's a great question.
Yeah, it is a
But I
good
certainly wouldn't want them to show up and have them to see people not doing it, but you would want to be at least prepared with your information in case they ask to see that.
All right. So here's another. You provide a cheat sheet with OSHA requirements, and if you do, I'm happy to send that out to everyone who's participating today.
So yes, that would be on our so what we have is our Center for Hearing Conservation program on our website. And so if you go through that, it has each of the 7-step things that you need to have for your program and the things that are required. So that is on our website. So yes, we do have that available to you.
Awesome. And I believe, so I'm going to be out that piece that you said, Sherry. Is that link in that piece?
Yes, it is. Yep.
Awesome. All right, good. You will all be seeing that. So will you go over NPP rating, lower the dBA of that rating, and double hearing protection only lowers the dBA 5 dB?
Okay, so when you have double hearing protection, the reason what that does is it only adds a small amount, and that is because of the way noise reduction works. So decibels are kind of on a log scale. So when you have double hearing protection, so like if you have if you are wearing your earplug on the inside and that earplug is 30 and then you wear an earmuff over it, it's only going to add like 3 to 5 dB to your protection level. And that's because of what's called decibel addition. So it doesn't add 30 and 30. When you have 2 earplugs that are 30 and 30, you only get to add 3 because of log addition. So that it sounds crazy technically, but that's the reason. So you don't get 60 by adding 30 and 30 together.
Okay. So could you explain the purpose of the medical questionnaire and where to obtain it? Okay, I believe that's also in the link, I would imagine.
The medical questionnaire, you mean for, tell me more about that question.
Could
So,
you explain the purpose of the medical questionnaire and
oh,
where
you mean like doing the audiograms and those kinds of things?
I would imagine so.
So yeah, so that would be in the link. Yep, that information would be available. So you want to, when you're doing audiograms, what you're trying to figure out is how much hearing loss a person already has and if their hearing loss is getting worse. So when a doctor is looking at an audiogram, they're able to tell you lose your hearing naturally just by getting older, but they're able to tell if the change is based on your age or if it's based on hearing exposure. And typically, if it's noise-induced hearing loss, right around the 4,000 mark on that audiogram is going to be significantly lower. And so if they look at that audiogram and they see a big a drop in your hearing around that 4,000 mark, then that means it's probably noise-induced hearing loss. So it can tell you if you're getting worse or not.
Sherry, thank you so much. That was fantastic. We appreciate your time. Give me 1 second, folks. We're restarting our video over here.
Are you able to see these resources?
Yes, we are.
Okay, so this last thing I'll leave with you is this, here's our hearing conservation resource, and then these are the 7 steps. So all of this is on the website. So all the information that you need is there. And then these are the worker training videos. So we do have this in English and Spanish. It's a 10-minute video that you can use as part of your toolbox talks with your teams. So that's it. I'm gonna turn it over to Tito and Carlos. And so I will stop sharing here.
Sherry, we appreciate it. You were fantastic. It's a pleasure to have had you here. I mean, that was some fantastic information and a great presentation. So I got to figure out how to put the little sounds in my PowerPoint presentations as well. So thank you very, very much. So I got Tito Gonzalez here. He's going to be talking about what he and SafeRide are going to be doing in regards to following up and ensuring you guys have some tools to follow up on what Sherry's been teaching you. So Tito, please.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for allowing us to visit with you today. We hope you guys got some great knowledge from Sherry's presentation. A couple of just key points on construction sites. So interestingly enough, I had the pleasure of working at several construction sites here in South Florida. A couple of really important things. One of the things that we were working on is communication equipment. And one of our construction companies was having a challenge where using earth moving equipment and basically hitting, for example, they were working on solar power farms, solar panel farms, and their earth moving equipment bumping into pallets of this stuff. So they were losing thousands of dollars. So guys were out there yelling, stop, stop, stop. And unfortunately, they were bumping equipment. So if you ever have a need for communication equipment, please reach out to us. We'll be more than happy to help. The next thing is, Sherry was talking about ear fit. And during stand down week, I did some testing at another construction site, and we were fit testing employees randomly. We wanted to make sure that the earplugs that they actually had actually fit in their ears. And one of the things that we discovered in that construction site is we did around 100 people, and 5 to 10 people actually had to go to ear muffs. So the earplugs that they were using actually did not work. I was fit testing them with small ones, large ones, and we actually had to put those employees in ear muffs. And unfortunately, these were guys who were welding and guys who are grinding all day. So if you ever have a need, please let us know. We want to help you guys out. One of the other things, right, we are doing you guys a bunch of samples of earplugs. If you like it, please reach out to us. We're here to help. We want to make sure that you guys are happy, your teams are happy. And then the last thing I'll leave with is we do a lot of educational training. We don't just like, here's a product, goodbye. I want your teams to be happy with what we want them to understand how important it is to use these items. Personally, I've lost a little bit of my hearing. I used to be an automotive rep for 3M and using power tools throughout the day. Now I'm in a situation where I'm having to get close to the mic, close to speakers to hear. If it's a crowded room and there's a lot of people speaking, I have to really hone in on and kind of do one of these now. And that's not good because I have little ones and sometimes I can't hear them. That is a bad thing. Definitely anything we can do to educate and help protect the workers, we're here to help. Sherry and I and others in Florida are here to help you guys out. All right. Thank you very much for allowing us to be here. Have a great day.
All right. Thank you very much, Tito. Let's see. I hear we're having some audio difficulties. Let me see if I can hammer that out. All right. Thank you very much to the 3M team. Thank you, Sherry. Thank you, Tito. Next month, our focus is going to be on REM, the band. I know what EMR is. So we're going to be talking about your mod rate, very important stuff. And for those of you who are into REM, maybe I'll put a soundtrack together for that. So who little orange crush in the background can't hurt. So next month's presentation, EMR, save the date. It's going to be on November 11th on the second Wednesday of the month. Okay. So some final thank yous. I cannot thank Sherry and Tito enough for putting together that fantastic presentation. I want to thank our sponsors, Milwaukee Tools. I want to thank our tech sponsor, Kelly Cronenberg, Safe Right Solutions here for hosting us, and the members of our safety committee who dedicate their time to making sure that our presentations work for you all. That's Debbie Hampton, Phil Nana, Mark Leon, Enrique Sequeira, and Brian Cardona. We recorded this session. We're going to make these available to you. Check out our safety page. We're going to have a follow-up with you. So after each session, you're going to have access to Toolbox Talks, so you can get this information down to your employees, the people who need it the most. Thank you all very much. Have a great day. See you guys in a month.